Buddha. Before we get started, I do want to thank everyone that joined us yesterday for our day of mindful working. We got a lot of stuff accomplished. Almost everything on my list was complete, minus the cleaning of the statues, which is okay. I'll do that later. But otherwise, I feel very happy and very accomplished. I hope everyone else felt the same way. Everyone that showed up and was able to attend and help. We got a lot done in a short amount of time, I guess, right? Half a day is a short amount of time. There's still lots to do, but we got a lot of the big stuff completed, so I just wanted to thank everyone that came and helped us. Thank you. Please join me in invoking our teacher's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. And before I forget, next week we will not have a service. I'll be out of town. So since we don't have a service, I encourage everyone to watch a previous service, one that you may have not seen, or scroll through the topics to find something you like. I have a bad habit of not including the topic in the name of the video, so I'm going to have to go back and edit all those, but all the topics for the most part are in the description, so do that. I'll be out of town, so the week after we'll have our normal service. So today's topic will be about meditation, about Buddhist meditation. In my previous talks, I've always mentioned some meditation, but since meditation class has stopped until whatever zombie apocalypse stops, really haven't discussed too much about meditation yet, at least not in detail like I would in the class. So today I would like to cover some high-level meditation really quick. That way, now that it's nice outside, finally, gives us the opportunity to hopefully meditate outside a little bit more, enjoy the nice weather, fresh air. But anyway, okay, meditation. I'm hoping, depending on how long I talk, maybe I'll give some time after the discussion to sit for meditation. Usually for our regular services, we do have meditation prior to the Dharma talk, but I've taken that aspect out since we've gone virtual, and also because I talk too much, so adding meditation to that would just super extend the service. So depending on how this goes, we will hopefully be able to have some time to sit afterward to do some meditation. Okay, meditation, Buddhist meditation, as I've mentioned before, is a very disciplined practice. There's a difference between Buddhist meditation and some of the other meditation practices out there, right? We have like the TM meditation, like the transcendental meditation that's highly practiced. Usually they do that like in schools and prisons and stuff like that. Where it's very, not really basic, but it's not an introspective kind of meditation for the most part, right? It's usually meditation to help people alleviate some sort of mental suffering, right? So stress or anxiety, stuff like that. Buddhist meditation, on the other hand, is very introspective, right? It falls under 2 major categories, samatha and vipassana. So samatha is concentration, and vipassana is contemplation or introspection or insight, depending on where you read it from. So there's the 2 major types, right? And everything else really falls under those 2 categories for the most part, right? All the different types of meditations, the different visualization practices and mantra practices and everything else for the most part falls into those 2 categories. Personally, I've been meditating much longer than I've been a Buddhist. probably around I was like 13 or 14 when I started figuring out the whole religion kind of lingering little thoughts there, right, about your home religion, as my mother calls it. So when I was starting to look into different religions and different paths of life, right, meditation was kind of in all the different religions in some way, shape, or form, right? Because meditation can include, prayer, for instance, right? Or reading the teachings or the Bible or whatnot. So meditation was a common friend within most major religions, right? So I started meditation way early in my life than I did for Buddhism. I didn't actually start practicing Buddhism until I was probably 19 or 20. So since then, I've been meditating. I don't know how good I've gone since then, if it's changed much. I believe it's changed a little bit, but the practice still stays the same. I've been meditating more lately because I've kind of found some qualities within my little messy mind that I'm trying to get rid of. Right? I thought I suppressed them, and I'm like, no, I can't just suppress them. I need to get rid of them altogether, right? So my meditation practice has almost doubled recently. This is probably why I'm even more tired than usual. But anyway, so for most beginner meditators, or those that have come in recently to meditation, or just beginning meditation, your goal is really to simply focus on the concentration part, right? As far as the two, Vipassana and Samatha, is concerned, you really have to master to an extent the concentration part, right? Because if you're not really able to concentrate for a long period of time, it's going to really be difficult for you to really contemplate on something. Because the contemplation is where the magic happens, right? That's where you get realizations. That's where you get the epiphanies. That's where you get your aha moments, is in the contemplation part. But you have to be able to concentrate on what you're contemplating on the teaching or the Dharma or whatever it is, right? Otherwise, you're just going to continue to get distracted. You're going to move here, move there, and you're going to mess up your whole session, right? But after you've mastered to an extent the concentration part, and kind of in between the concentration and contemplation comes a period where our goal becomes letting go. Right, letting go of everything in our mind, because as we know, our mind is just full of defilements, right? The three poisons, the greed, ignorance, and anger. Sometimes we may not realize they're there, right? Sometimes we're like, oh, I'm not that bad of a person, right? I'm usually good, but we all have good and bad within us all, right? And we try to create more goodness and get rid of the badness, right? But for the most part, we each have little sections of both. So then our goal comes to let go, right? So by letting go, that allows our mind to be free. Our consciousness is now free to see things as they really are, right? And it helps us, and once that kind of happens, once that's been established, it's really easier for us to start doing the contemplation part. You don't have to completely let go when I say let it go, right? But you have to be able to. Kind of have some sort of letting go, right? It doesn't have to be 100%, but it has to be just something, right? Because you have to know what it feels like to let go of being angry at something or someone and all this other stuff, right? Otherwise, by letting go, right, by practicing mindfulness and concentration and whatever other methods and forms we're using, there's about 4 qualities of cognition really that happens when we're trying to establish mindfulness, or even when we're trying to contemplate something, right? Those 4 qualities are perceiving an object, right? So perceiving the raw object as it is. For example, the clock, right? We perceive the clock. We know it's there. We see it. It's there. Then we're receiving it. Then that's where it kind of establishes in our mind, like, okay, that's a clock now, right? So we're receiving it. And we know it's a clock. And we see and we see it, right? We see the clock. And then we investigate it, right? So we're investigating the clock, we're looking at it, and we see that it's 12:45, right? And then we establish its nature. And then that's where we say it, right? We validate that it's 12:45, right? So everything that we see happens on those four qualities, right? So we receive it, we perceive it, we receive it, investigate, and then we establish its nature or its reality. So by doing that, when we do that when we're practicing meditation or being mindful, it helps us get to that point where we can really see things as they truly are, right? Because as we know, not everything is what it is, right? Everything happens because of other things and situations. We react because of our mental perceptions, our past experiences, right? Our goods, our bads. So by kind of digging through all that, we can really see where certain feelings come from. We can see why we feel a certain way towards something or someone, and really get to the core nature of it, to kind of either see it as something good that we can better, or something bad and we can kind of eliminate out of our life. Okay, we've gone off topic. Back to concentration. So in concentration, there's two major sutras that we typically follow for meditation. So for the concentration part, we typically follow the Anapanasati Sutra, which is the mindfulness of breathing. That's the sutra we usually focus on when we have our retreats. And for the contemplation side, we typically follow the Satipatthana Sutra, which is the four foundations of mindfulness, right? So in the Anapanasati Sutra, the mindfulness of breathing, there's 16 practices, right? And then the first four are usually the heart of the sutra. So the first four practices is, as in the sutra, is as I'm breathing in long, I know that I'm breathing in long. As I'm breathing out long, I know that I'm breathing out long. As I'm breathing in short, I know I'm breathing in short. As I breathe out short, I know that I'm breathing out short. As I'm breathing in, I calm my body. As I breathe out, I calm. As I breathe out, I calm my body. And as I breathe in, I know my body. And as I breathe out, I know my body. So the first two is focus on breathing, right? It's focused on the way we're breathing. So in the classes, I probably have gone over at least five sessions of just concentrating on methods of breathing meditation. And there's so many out there, right? The most traditional is counting. So as we breathe in and breathe out, we count 1, we breathe out, we breathe in, we count 2, and out 3, up until 10, and then we start over, right? And if we get distracted, if we lose count, if something happens where we got off topic or got off our concentration, we just go back to 1, right? We reset again. It sounds easy, but as we do it, after a few minutes, then we kind of see where we start getting distracted again, right? After a while, and what I like to do is, once I get to 10, is go backwards from 10 to 1. It gives a little extra challenge there, right? That's what I typically use. That's one of two methods that I personally use. And it's very insightful in a way, because you kind of see how good you are at concentration, right? Because really, that's one way you can evaluate your concentration and see really where you are by recognizing that you're being distracted or you've lost count or something, right? Because as I mentioned before, we're gonna think, we're gonna be distracted. It's gonna happen. It's inevitable, right? Our mind is just, it's like, hey, I don't want to be still. I want to be thinking of going to Six Flags or cooking dinner or whatever it may be, right? And it's okay to think, right? I told you it's okay to think, but it's not okay to continue entertaining that thought, right? So the thought arises where you're like, okay, what's for dinner? Do I have to go grocery shopping? Do I have everything on my list? Do I have all the ingredients, right? So the thought of food comes up, but as long as you don't entertain it and add to it, right? You're adding what you have, what you don't have, etc., etc. That's where it kind of gets you, right? But once it arises, and sure, maybe you play around with it a little bit, but as long as if you recognize that you're thinking, as long as you've recognized that a thought has come into your mind and you're playing with it, then that's your mindfulness right there. You've kind of hooked the distraction and kind of pulled it in. Like, no, don't go over there. You need to stay right here, right? Kind of like training a dog, training a puppy, right? Back on the cushion, sit down. Because our mind is like a child, right? The more you tell it no, the more it wants what you're telling it no to, right? It's like a monkey, right? It's jumping from one branch to another, and so we're jumping from one thought to another, and so it's not really helpful to kind of like concentrate so tightly where you're really just straining your mind, you're straining your eyes, you're straining your whole body, right? Because you're concentrating so hard, and that itself is going to be a distraction. Because you're going to hurt your eyes by straining, you're going to hurt your body by tensing up, right? So it's no use of trying to hold on to it so tightly. Really, it should just be fluid. It just, as you're thinking, okay, I'm thinking, just go back to your object of meditation, which is your breath, or whatever else you're using. And it's going to happen for quite some time. And it'll slow down. It may not ever stop, which is okay, right? But it will slow down. And once it slows down, right, once it slows down, then we can really start practicing a little bit more of the higher levels or the more advanced methods, right? But anyway, back to the 16 exercises. So the first two is all about the breath, right? Oh, I didn't mention my second favorite method. So my second favorite method, which I don't have a name for it, because there's a name, there's a mathematical term for what I'm trying to describe, but I don't remember what it is, and I can't find what it is, so bear with me with my very weird explanation. So my second method of meditation on the breath is, it's still breathing, obviously, but you're not really concentrating so much on the breath itself. So it's really, you need kind of like a ticking of the clock. So I use the clock, for instance, right? So as the clock ticks, right, you're counting 1. Ticks again, 1, 2. And for each time it ticks, you're counting with it, right? So it's 1, start over, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you go on to like 10 or whatever. And you do the same thing backwards, counting from 10 to 1. I still can't remember what it's a descending term, whatever. But you know what I'm saying, right? Makes sense? Okay. That is very helpful for me. Probably of all the different methods, that's worked for me the most. Because it's so easy to mess up. It's so easy to forget where you left off. It's easy to, especially when you're going backwards, it's more difficult to count backwards when you're really trying to focus, right? So for me, that's been probably the most successful of all the methods, minus the first method I mentioned. Yes.
Is all of this in a specific sutra?
No, this one I made up.
All right.
The first one is, so the counting is in the sutras. It's in the Anapanasati Sutra, and it's in the sutra of I think it's called the Foundations of Sitting Meditation, which is a very good sutra. It's a little bit more advanced meditation sutra because it covers different types of and methods of meditation too. Yeah. Yes.
And what you're talking about right now is the concentration.
The concentration part, yes. Because once we get super concentrated, then we can get to a point where we call access meditation, which is what I was trying to say last week. I forgot what the word was. But access concentration is your full focus, one-pointed concentration on your object. That is a prerequisite and a must-have before you're able to advance to any other stage or level of meditation. Because everything falls from that. Like that's the that's the base, that's the core, that's the foundation. And the Anapanasati Sutra, the Mindfulness of Breathing Sutra, is the teaching to get to that point, right? Because after that you have the 4 jhanas, or the 4 dhyanas, which is the advanced levels of meditation, and that comes elsewhere. There's very little sutra. There's very little literature on the 4 dhyanas or jhanas, but most of the good instruction stuff out there is the commentary on it. So, but we don't have to worry about that now. It's like way down the line. I'm thinking how much more I want to go into this. I'm looking at the comment, we should probably meditate, but okay. So anyway, I will also recommend to go back and watch the meditation class videos as well, because I've covered the different methods and different techniques. And really the only reason I've included so many different kinds is because maybe the counting doesn't work for you, right? Maybe you just get too distracted, you get too bored, and it's not helpful, right? So I've given you different other methods to use to try to find the one that works for you best. But honestly, if you get to a method and you're bored with it, then it's not the method that it's boring, it's just your concentration is weak, right? Because boredom is one of the 5 hindrances. And these hindrances are the hindrances that are going to hold you back from really be able to get to those established and high levels of meditation. It's probably going to be one of my Dharma talks is the 5 hindrances. That'll be a good one to talk about soon. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I think I've covered, like I said, I just want it very high level. And hopefully it gives us an idea of where to start, at least with the 2 methods. But I would recommend also reading the Anapanasati Sutra. It's not a very long sutra. It's like 20-something, 30 pages. To me, that's not long, but we chant it during our retreats, but we don't chant the whole thing. We only chant the first like 4 or 6 pages up until the end of the 16 practices. That's probably what I'll mention. But anyway, but that's where I will start again when the meditation class starts again. Is I'll start focusing more on that sutra specifically and through the 16 practices. Usually I'll cover about 3 or 4 at a time. The first 4 is, like I said, is like the heart of the sutra. It's the heart of everything else, because all the other practices and exercises within that list fall back to the first 4. Anyway, I don't think I even finished that 4 list. Anyway, so the first 2 is about the breathing. The second 2, the third and fourth, is about the body. So really, after we've been meditating and we're focusing on our breath and we're doing it correctly, because we have to remember that when we're breathing, when we're counting our breath, you don't want to control your breath, right? So you don't want to force breathing in and breathing out to count. You want to just let it be natural. So as you're breathing, that's when you want to count. You don't want to count before you start breathing, because otherwise it's going to feel a little controlled, and we don't want to do that, because it's not natural, right? We just want to naturally breathe, and then as we're breathing, we start counting, or we do whatever we're doing. Then after that, once our breathing is very firm and it's natural, we start to breathe very lightly, very shallow, right? To a point where it may even feel like we're not breathing at all. As scary as that sounds sometimes, it's actually really where we want to be. That's like the ideal breathing situation you want to breathe in. It's the same area of breathing, like when we're sleeping, for instance, if we're not dreaming. We have a very shallow, light breath. And so that's where we want to be when we're meditating. Because once we get to that point, then our body starts to become very relaxed and very calm, right? Because our breathing has to be calm before our body becomes calm. Then if our body is not calm, then our mind's not going to be calm, right? Because our mind's going to be like, oh, my legs hurt, oh, my back hurts, oh, I need to itch, or I need to move, or I need to adjust, or whatever, right? So your breathing really helps calm your body. And once your body is calm, it helps your mind to be calm. And then once we're in that calm state, right? If we are in a session long enough, we may, and if your eyes are closed, you may start seeing things, right? You might seeing lights, or you might feel like little tingling sensations, which is fine, but we don't want to concentrate on that, right? I had a lot of people come and be like, oh, I see things when I'm meditating. That's a really good sign, right? I'm like, not really. I mean, it's a sign that you're in a specific place, but it's not going to help you. It's not anything important. It's just there because it's a byproduct of your practice. So don't worry about seeing things or whatever. I like the tingling feeling because it's like, ooh, it's like my body itself is like making micro massages all around to kind of help me calm a little bit more, right? So that's probably my favorite part. But it'll surpass, right? It usually happens for me within the first 10-15 minutes, because then I get in the zone and then it kind of goes away. And then still like an hour and a half later, the only tingling thing is my foot like dying, because it's like asleep and I feel like it's about to like get chopped off. And that's another thing, body pain. People don't like it when I say this, but when I say when you fall asleep, just suck it up, right? Every time I say that, people are like, no, like they just start whining and they just like don't like that I said that. But really, that's what you have to do. Because as Americans, as a Western society, we don't really sit on the floor very often, right? Unless we're like camping and singing Kumbaya or something. Otherwise, we're rarely on the floor. And because of that, our body is just not used to being in a position. So it's going to fall asleep way quicker than someone who's always sat on the floor, right? But once that happens, it's temporary, right? Leon and I were talking about it yesterday. Like, pain is temporary. It'll hurt for a few seconds or minutes, and then it'll just eventually go away. The foot falling asleep won't go away, but the feeling of it, right? The pain that we feel from it will surpass eventually. But you really just have to fight through it.
And it's not, you haven't cut off the blood, you're not going to get gangrene because there's no blood getting to your leg. It's simply compression on nerves in your leg.
Right. So it's not, don't worry about falling it off. It's not going to fall off. Unless you're like really constricting blood flow. Otherwise, just suck it up. But that's the only part for me. I feel like you really just have to hold it. If you start having back pain, right? Because also what happens is we start slouching after a while, right? I always say when you first begin, I like to do stretching before I meditate. I have to stretch. I've had a knee injury when I was in college and an ankle injury, so my knees and ankles get pretty banged up when I'm doing too much work or meditating for too long. But you really have to do some stretches if you're going to be sitting for at least 15 minutes or more. I feel like you really need to do some stretching, especially back stretches. You really want to be able to loosen up the muscles there. And then when we sit, the best posture you can get your back in, the most natural posture, is when you raise your hands all the way up to your head, right? Just stretch up, and then just bring your hands slowly down to your lap. That straightness is the most natural your back can get, and it'll be the most comfortable. Because our muscle is really like Play-Doh, right? Once you mold it into place, once you put your back into place, it'll stay there until some force comes and pushes it down, right? And that force for us is our thoughts, our distractions, right? Because we're not concentrating on our object of meditation anymore, and we're thinking about food or whatever, it's like pushing us down, right? So that's when we start slouching. So if we recognize that we're slouched or bent down or whatever, then we want to be mindful of be mindful of it, and then be mindful, kind of mentally note that you need to lift or raise, right? Just give it a quick label of what you want to do and just do it slowly and put yourself back up. What I also see people do is do this, right? And they hold themselves up. I'm like, what are you doing? It looks like you're squatting or something, right? Like, it's not a good position to be in there, because then you're holding yourself up, right? You're using your knees and your arms as support to hold yourself, and you don't want to do that either. You can put your hands on your knees, right, to meditate, but you're just doing it very gently, right? You're not holding yourself up. You're not using it as support. You're just sitting it there, right? But I feel like palm in palm is probably best. I think that's all for body aches and pains, right? Anything else that might fall off? No. Okay. But yeah, practice makes perfect, right? So if you sit long enough in meditation regularly, your foot will stop falling asleep. Well, maybe not. Mine still falls asleep every once in a while, not very often, but it depends on the cushion I'm sitting on. Because usually, the higher you are, the better. So you really want your butt to be a little bit higher, up to like knee-thigh level, right? So you want all this really aligned. That way you're not putting too much pressure on your butt or on your ankles, right? You're kind of just hovering a little bit, right? So you don't have pressure points anywhere. And we also kind of create like this triangular foundation where it's stable, right? You have this triangle foundation stabled. So yeah, that's why we usually use 2 cushions to sit. It's easier, or one like hard cushion. Okay, that's it, right? As far as pain is concerned. Okay, so we'll sit for meditation for 10, 15 minutes, or whenever I feel like emerging. Yeah, so let's sit again. Remember just to find that comfortable, suited position, right? Clear your mind. Make sure you know what your object of meditation is. If you're counting or if you're listening to the clock, right? Establish that goal of what we're going to do first. And then just meditate. If you get distracted, again, I mentioned before, like if you hear a sound or a smell or anything outside of your mind, right? Just give it a quick label. Let's just say sound or dog or car or door, whatever it is, right? Make a mental note and just go back to your breathing. And then just count, right? Evaluate yourself. I can't tell you how good you're doing or how bad you're doing because I'm not in your head yet. Just kidding. But you are your own evaluator, you're your own examiner, right? So you have to be the one to be a judge for yourself. And hopefully as you evaluate your practice and you kind of be honest with yourself as far as where you're at or where your weaknesses are, your opportunities are, that'll motivate you to practice more, right? So for example, when I recognize some certain characteristics or faults, I guess, within myself, I double my meditation time. So I'm like, I want you out of my head, like ASAP. So you're able to be honest with yourself, right? Because you may think that your practice is okay, or you're doing enough, or it's being sufficient, right? But as I always emphasize, meditation is not a hobby. Do not treat it as a hobby. Because if you treat it as a hobby, then we're not taking it seriously, and we're not going to be honest with ourselves. So if you use it as an actual, if you approach it as a discipline, as a practice, and you're honest with yourself, and you are honest with how you're practicing and where you're at in your practice, then it's easier for you to kind of have a baseline and know where we need to go next, right? Because there are levels of meditation, right, according to Baha'i Zen masters, right, and each level is an accomplishment of a certain aspect of mind, whether gaining something or releasing something else, right? So that kind of gives us an idea of where we may be, or where we want to be, or want to go, or can go. We really shouldn't take that as like concrete literature that's how it is for everybody, because it's really not. But that's generally kind of the roadmap that we follow. Okay, I'm gonna stop because otherwise we're gonna go. Okay. All right, so 10 minutes. Let's just do 10 minutes of meditation, and then we can come back and maybe talk about it for a little bit. That felt like no time for me. Yeah, you get used to it for a while.
He's right. The more you fall into concentration, the less you're in space-time, and so time just doesn't really.
Time's relative. Time is made up. So 10 minutes is all relative. Yeah, I felt like I just took 2 breaths and it was already like 10 minutes. My shortest session is about 45 minutes. So 10 minutes is like nothing. And then I think 45 minutes is also the minimum we do during our retreats. I was like, no, it's 45 minutes, that's so long. But then we come out and we're like, oh, that wasn't as bad as we thought it was. And it really isn't. We get used to it after a while. But okay, how was your concentration? How many times did you get distracted? Yeah,
just and awareness that you're off somewhere.
And what happens sometimes, especially after we practice counting, is that we'll still be counting and distracted at the same time because we get used to counting. But sometimes, like what happened to me, like I'd be like 1, 2, 3, 7, 10. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here, right?
That's why counting backwards is good.
Right, that's why counting exactly. So I usually do the counting in the morning because I'm pretty awake, and then in the evening when I'm like not so awake, I do the whole clock one because it really grabs you a little bit stronger. But that's why you have to experiment with the different kinds, different ways, different methods.
I have a tendency to want to. The breath works for me, but I have a tendency just in nature that I don't want to. I find myself kind of controlling my breath. Of course, we've talked about because then you're attached to the breath.
Right.
You don't want to be attached to it. You just want to be an observer.
Same thing with distractions. You don't want to be, or thinking in general. You don't want to be.
They're going to arise, but you just
right.
Like a cloud in the sky. The cloud's there now. In 10 minutes, it won't be there.
Yep. Practice though. Practice, 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 practice. Meditation is not passive whatsoever. So, yeah, keep working at it. I guess I'll control how much I start talking from now on, and we'll add back in the meditation in the beginning. I can't make any promises though.
It's not like having a meditation. Because we get all the information, we meditate for a while, and then we go back to the information.
Yeah.
It's helpful.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, for me, it's a break because I already meditate like 3 hours, so it's like, oh, I don't have to meditate right now. Okay, any questions, concerns, emotional outbursts that I want to hear about? Just kidding. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and transfer the mirror and go to chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merits of all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of the. May the hearers awaken from peace and transcend all anxiety and listen, listen, this wonderful sound brings me back to my true home. In gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our wholehearted mindfulness and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. The incense in the censer now is burning all the Dharma realm in every auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body homage to the incense cloud canopy Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas. Homage to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma, insatiably Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empties and 3 periods of time. Homage to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha Maitreya, honored future Manjushri, great wisdom Bodhisattva, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattva, and the magic mountain assembly of and Bodhisattvas. Homage to Amitabha Buddha, ultimate bliss of Avalokiteshvara, great compassion Bodhisattva, great strength Bodhisattva, earth story great vow Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure seed Bodhisattvas. 1,000 hands, 1,000 hands, and he runs like this. Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Harya Avalokiteshavaraya Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunikaya Om Savalavati Sodanasasya Namaskritva Namanarya Avalokiteshavaralantava Namo Nilakanta Shri Mahapatashami Sarvadata Shubham Ajiyom Sarvasattva Namo Pasava Namo Bhagamabhateto Tadyatha Om Avalokalokate Kalati Ishiri Mahasattva Sabo Sabo Mara Mara Mashi Mashi Goro Goro Gamyan Doro Doro Bashati Mahabashati Dara Dara Dirini Shvaraya Jara Jara Mahabamara Modelehi Shina Shina Alashin Balashari Vasha Vasnin Varashaya Horo Horo Pra Horo Horo Shri Sara Sara Siri Siri Soro Soro Bodaya 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 Maitreya Nilakansta Vayamane Swaha Sitaya Swaha Mahasitaya Swaha Sitaya Shvaraya Swaha Nilakante Swaha Pranila Swaha Shisamahokaya Swaha Sarva Mahasataya Swaha Chakrahasaya Swaha Padma Keshaya Swaha Nilakanta Pantalaya Swaha Mopodi Shankaraya Swaha Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Arya Avalokite Shavaraya Swaha Om Sidyanto Mandra Badaya Swaha. The Dharma body is bringing morning light in concentration. My heart is at peace. A half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day and I vow to go through it. Fullness, the sun of wisdom has risen, shining in every direction. Noble Sangha, diligently bring your mind into meditation. Namo Shakyamuni Bodhaya. Namo Shakyamuni Bodhaya. Namo Shakyamuni Bodhaya. The one who bows and the one who is bowed to are both by nature empty. Therefore, the communication between them is inexpressibly perfect. Our practice center is the niche of Indra, reflecting all Buddhas. Every as my own person reflects in all Buddhas, to whom with my whole life I go for refuge. Offering light in the 10 directions, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to whom we bow in gratitude. Teaching and living the way of awareness and the Bodhisattva of understanding, to whom we bow in gratitude. Working mindfully, working joyfully for the sake of all beings, Samanta Bhadra, the Bodhisattva of great act, to whom we bow in gratitude. Responding to suffering, serving beings in countless ways, Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, great compassion, to whom we bow in gratitude. Seed of awakening and loving kindness in children, sprouts, and all beings, Maitreya, the Buddha to be, to whom we bow in gratitude. Showing the way fearlessly and compassionately, the stream of all our ancestral teeth, to whom we bow in gratitude. The Dharma is deep and lovely. We now have a chance to see it and practice. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, perfect understanding, shed light on the five skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penance, he overcame ill-being. Listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perception, mental form, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produce, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings, no perception, mental formations, nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattva's ground in perfect understanding, find no obstacles. Having no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at full right and universal. Therefore, one should know that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequal mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible mantra. Prajna paramita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate gate para, gate para, samgate bodhi swaha, gate gate para, para samgate bodhi swaha, gate gate para, gate para, samgate bodhi swaha. We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to. In order to understand, we invoke your name. In order to practice listening with all our attention, open-heartedness, we will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or we will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what person is saying and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering Bhadra, we aspire to practice your vow to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning and to ease up one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to us. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. We invoke your name, Shiti Garba. We aspire to learn your way of being. Where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair, so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those. We are determined not to forget about or abandon those in desperate situations, to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, human rights are not being heard. We know that hell can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute, creating more hells on earth, and to help transform the hells that already exist. We will order to realize the qualities of perseverance and stability, so that like the can always be supportive and faithful to those in need. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Dwelling in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty and love. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining like the sun, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path.